It's the Tech Ed Podcast. Welcome in. I am your host, Matt Kirchner. I have been going through life way too long and had way too many experiences and been put in exactly the right place at exactly the right time to believe that that is just a coincidence. And so it was that I crossed paths with today's guest on the Tech Ed Podcast. As our audience might know, I spend a fair amount of time in Idaho during the first quarter of every year. Love to ski, get a lot of work done while I'm out there as well. But that's where I was several weeks ago. And I was sitting on the chairlift. And for our individuals in the audience who are skiers, you know that to pass time on a 5 or 10 minute lift ride, a lot of times you will strike up a conversation with whoever is on that lift with you, stranger or not. And it starts out with, where have you skied this morning? What runs have you done? And then if that person is from somewhere else, you ask where they're from. And if you have enough time on that lift ride, you might even get into what they do for a living. That is what happened with today's guest, Kathy Meyers. She is a teacher at Corner Canyon High School in Draper, Utah. And I asked her what she did. We got to talking about the work she was doing. She found out she was in education. And then I found out what she was teaching. And I was like, oh my goodness, I had never heard of this before in a high school. Our audience needs to meet this person and talk about the great learning she is bringing into the high school classroom. It's got applications across STEM and tech ed and beyond. Let's start out by welcoming Kathy Meyers to the Tech Ed Podcast. Kathy, great to see you again, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me today. I really do believe in what I teach.
No, I know you do. And that was so clear when we were having that conversation. And it was like, not just the content that you're teaching, but the fact that you are so into it. And you started talking about some of the benefits that your students are receiving, and students coming back years later and saying, what I learned in this course is paying dividends throughout life after high school. That's got to be incredibly heartwarming. We will talk about that. But the topic first, so tell our audience what it is that you teach that is so unique in a high school setting.
All right. So I teach secondary math to 15 and 16-year-olds. And I also teach sports psychology. I received my master's degree from the University of Utah like 25 years ago. And ever since I finished my degree, I started teaching sports psychology. They're like, that's so cool. Like, go for it. You can teach it. And at the time, there wasn't a curriculum for high school, the high school level. So I took the information I was learning at my master's degree and made it more to a high school level. And that's what I've been teaching. And I just keep adding to it all the cool research every year.
Yeah, it's awesome. So the math part of it, obviously not so unique. There's tons and tons of teachers that are teaching math at the high school level, but integrating that sports psychology and teaching that sports psychology, really, really fascinating. What is sports psychology, if you could give a definition in a few sentences?
Yeah, sports psychology is getting your mindset correct so that you can perform at your best. And it's not necessarily just for athletes, it's for performers of all kinds, choir, theater, dance, whatever, you can name it, but it's just getting your mind in the moment to go do your best in the very moment that you're in and not worry about like past or future, and try to have your mind connected to your body. So it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, so I can totally see applications for that, certainly in sports, right? The psychology of sports, how you think about the sport that you're in, how you clear your mind, how you focus, all of these things, whether you're playing baseball, playing football, you're a dancer, you're a skier. Having your mind where it needs to be and being present, super, super important in the field of sports. But then you're taking those methodologies into the classroom. So go a little bit deeper on what your students are learning.
Right. So how I take the idea into math is I just feel like a lot of people have given up when they're 15. A lot of students don't love math and they're struggling. It's hard for them. Really, math is hard for a lot of people, a lot of the world. I have parent-teacher conference next week, and I'll have parents come, and it's really easy for people to say, the adults, like, we don't speak very highly of math. We don't act like we can do it. Like, parents come, adults that are pretty awesome come and say, oh, I'm not a math person. Like, people are so freely willing to admit that. And in a civilized society, first world country, you would never admit that you can't read. But people are really happy to say, oh, I can't do math. That's for my husband, or that's for the other people of the world. Like, I'm not that person. And I don't feel that way about math at all. Like, I feel like it's like a sports skill. You want to learn something? Okay, you can learn it. Get the right people around you to support you, learn the technique, learn the methods, and make sure it's fun. Like, I feel like if 15-year-olds hate math, they have a long life of math being involved, and they're going to get ripped off. They're maybe not going to get the job they want because they're too scared to do math.
So all these years that I joke with my kids somewhat that I was really, really good at math until they started putting letters in the equations. And as soon as I got into algebra, and I'm like, what are these letters doing here? And I feel like I'm actually pretty decent at math, but used to joke about that. And you're right. I never thought about it that way. The number of people that say, well, I'm just not a math person. I'm no good at math. So that's a really, really interesting perspective. And in as much as we talk about, STEM education being science, technology, engineering, and math certainly in one form or another fundamental to so many career opportunities, so many life skills, right? And so if somebody's giving up on themselves as a freshman or sophomore in high school, long life ahead of them, to your point of having to rely on math, that maybe they haven't built those skills because they haven't built the confidence that they too can be good at it. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely. I feel like it's all about confidence and about, like, me as their teacher instilling a safe place for them to learn and grow and have a growth mindset and fail easily. Like, if I just feel like that's a huge part of learning is it not going well. And then, hey, try again, right?
What's the experience like for a student? So I'm a student that here I am. I mean, let's just say you're teaching freshmen, sophomore, juniors. What year primarily? Those?
Yeah, sophomores.
Yeah. Okay. So we're teaching sophomores. I'm a high school sophomore. I get into Kathy's class, and I'm that student that says I've struggled with math. I've never quite gotten it, and it's getting harder and harder. What's the experience like for that student? How are you working with that student in a way that would be different from a traditional classroom?
Right. My day one to them is I tell them that I'm their cheerleader. Like, I'm here to support you however you need me, right? Like, I mean, I have a pom-pom. Like, I
Awesome.
seriously pull it out the first day, and I'm like, I'm your cheerleader, you guys. I'm just here to facilitate however you need me to be your teacher this year. I don't know what that means for you, but I'm going to put the work in as your teacher, and I expect you to put the work in and keep trying. Like, I'm going to try to give you a place to feel safe and to feel like you can ask the questions, that you can be supported when it doesn't go well. Like, I want everybody to try, and we're going to have a lot of wrong answers, and then we'll try to figure out how to get to the right one. That's what I feel like my job is as their teacher, is to really try to believe in them and try to give them some hope. I guess it goes back to self-talk. First, what I teach in sports psychology, one of the number one things I teach in sports psychology is how we talk to ourselves.
Yeah, so go deeper on that. I'm a huge believer, by the way, in what you're saying. I mean, things like mental health are real things. Depression are real things. I'm not making light of any of that, of course, but so much of having kind of this happy, successful, content life is kind of how we run our brains and how we think about things. And so talk a little bit more about that self-talk and how students can reinforce positive and, for that matter, negative behaviors by what they're saying in their head.
And I do a whole bunch of topics in sports psychology, but I make sure I keep going back to self-talk, because I feel like we can either sabotage ourselves and go down, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I'm not adequate, I can't do it, I'm going to quit. Or we can say, I'm awesome, I can find the right people to help me, I can keep trying, I can do a little part of it. Maybe I understand this part, but I don't understand this part. Breaking a problem down is super valuable for kids that are getting overwhelmed by something that looks big to them. When I hear kids talking negative, I'm like, okay, wait, you can do this. I can help you. Together, you and I can figure this out. But we set ourselves up to fail miserably when we're telling ourselves we're not adequate.
Sure.
And we're not enough, or I don't work hard enough. I don't, stuff like that, and how I teach self-talk in sports psych is I teach it like we're the gatekeeper in our head. Like, if you ever been to, I have a neighborhood in my city that there's a gate, and there's a guy that sits at the little house, and you drive up to it, and I don't live there, but my daughter went to a friend's house, and the guy asked me where I'm going, and I tell him, and I guess he believed me, and he lets me in.
Right.
But the gatekeeper doesn't have to let you in. They can say, nope, you're not coming in, right? And I feel like that's how we have to be in our minds, is we have to be the gatekeeper. Like, when the negative starts sneaking in, like, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not adequate, I'm not confident, we got to stop it. Sports psychology says, like, you should do something physical. Like, when you see the negatives coming in, you, like, snap your fingers, and that goes, oh, yeah, I got to be positive, right? But really, like, we have to be so strong in our minds and go, oh, stop. I can't, that's not helping me succeed. That negative self-talk doesn't help me be awesome. It's going to take me on a bad course.
It does the opposite, right? It reinforces those negative behaviors and those negative thoughts.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yep. I'm too dumb to learn math. Like, that's not what I want anybody to believe when they're 15.
every once in a while, somebody in the studios of the Tech Ed podcast, unintentional on my part, will hear me mutter to myself, "I'm a genius," or "Wow, am I brilliant?" And it's exactly the opposite. And it's not my ego alive and well necessarily. It's it is, the more of those messages that you send to yourself, the more you're positioning yourself to live out those behaviors, and it becomes a cycle, right?
Absolutely.
The more you reinforce those things, whether positive or negative, the more you replay those things over and over in your brain, the more likely you are to end up in a situation where you're creating your own reality and your own future, and overcome obstacles in a lot of ways based upon how you're thinking. You can create those negative outcomes as well. So it sounds like we're really, really aligned in terms of that line of thinking. So it's one thing, certainly important to snap your fingers, be your gatekeeper, put up the stop sign, tell that mental image or that thought to go away. But then you got to discipline yourself to think about something that's opposite, right? That's going to take you in the right direction. So what happens in that regard?
Right. So then I feel like, the positive self-talk, and I have this like hitting head where you have all the negative things, and then you're like, what are the just one things? Usually it's like task oriented with a sport. I coach a softball team here too. And if you like snap your wrist at the end, what is the technique that I should do to make this happen? I feel like oriented on the task or self-talk, for batters getting up to bat, the big thing is to strike out. But you don't want to say strike out in your head. You want to say quick hands or see it, hit it, or drive through the ball. You want that positive message to replace that, like positive affirmations, right? And there's all sorts of ones in math that I've put together, and I've had kids come up with them too. Like their kids are so smart and amazing. Like, I'm smart. I can try harder. I could just try a little longer. Sometimes you just need to put in a little more time or a different method. Like I talked to you about, I teach Sudoku, and there's so many different methods for solving Sudoku that, okay, just try a different way. That way is not working out, so try a new way. There's all sorts of new ways, and that's advantageous to all of us. Oh, this isn't working out. I got to try something new. Like, I'm not going to keep hitting my head against the wall and it not going well. I got to try something new.
So you're actually teaching Sudoku in the class. Tell me about that.
I always start my class with that. And you guys that know Sudoku, most math people do, or STEM people do, right?
For sure. Yeah, I know. For sure. I know it. Absolutely.
Anyway, but Sudoku, there's a bunch of methods for solving them. Like you can either like figure out all the numbers in a column or all the numbers in a row, or you can do like the box and figure out, the 9 numbers that goes in that box. Or every Sudoku, regular Sudoku anyway, every number has 9. So there's those 4 strategies. And so I teach them how to do Sudoku, and I teach them the strategies. And I teach them one thing about it is like, you should always use pencil so you can erase, and make sure you don't put a number where it doesn't belong. Don't guess. Like, you have to logic it out in your mind. You have to do process of elimination, or you have to make sure you can say why the number goes in the place, right? So then we start like doing it, and you get stuck. Like, you get stuck with 2 numbers, and you could guess, but that's a rule. You can't guess. So when I get stuck, I'm like, okay, what do you do next, guys? And I just feel like they keep saying, try another way. Like, try a different method. Like, try the box way. Try how many numbers in the thing. Like, what one has the most numbers? Maybe you could figure out with all the 3s. Find all 9 3s in the box. So I just don't want kids to quit, Like, that's the message here. Like, don't quit when it gets hard. When it gets hard is when we should dig in and go, oh, there should be another way. I'm smart. I can figure this out. I can work on this. I can have something new could come maybe. So I feel like that's how Sudoku is so valuable way of teaching kids to problem solve, because math is just problem solving.
Sure. Problem solving, hitting a wall, finding another way, and to your point, not guessing, which can create problems down the road, right? I mean, as soon as you guess, if you guess wrong, you could get a long way down a puzzle and then realize that you made a mistake. So you have to make sure that you're solving it with logic, and so it really sounds like that process really sets the tone for what they're going to do in the rest of the class, which obviously includes a lot of problem solving, includes a lot of math, also includes things like leadership and teamwork and public speaking, which you wouldn't necessarily maybe think would belong or would be common in this type of coursework. So tell me about why it's so important to teach those as well.
Yeah, leadership and teamwork. Leadership, I just teach kids that even though you don't wear the captain band and you're the captain of the team, like, you're going to have places in your life that you're going to lead. Maybe it's in your family. Maybe it's even in this classroom. Like, when I'm the teacher trying to get control of 36 kids, I'm in Utah. I have a lot of kids in my classes, right?
Yeah,
and some of the kids can help me be the leaders to calm people down and and get people motivated and focused and in that realm. So there's just lots of ways we're leaders, and it usually is just about respect and about putting in extra time and effort. Leaders show up early, they stay late, they do the extra things. And, with leadership in STEM, like, oh, I could do the extra things to do better at this math class or this test or whatever's next. What's the extra thing, right? Teamwork, I always talk about big team, little me. And the whole plan of the team is sort of bigger than just me alone. But it also means that I don't want to shrink. I want to shine and give my talents and gifts to the situation, whether it's the classroom, whether it's the sports field, that I need to give my gifts and talents. And I want everybody else to bring their best selves too. It's not really me competing against you when we're on a team. Like, you bring your best self, I'll bring my best self, and everybody brings their best stuff. And we're going to make an awesome, amazing product, right? But I feel like sometimes when there's one leader, even like I'm the coach of the softball team, yeah, my ideas are valuable, but so are everybody else's ideas. Like, I need them. I have 4 coaches I'm working with, and I need them to bring their best talents and best ideas to my team to make all these girls have a great experience. That's my goal.
I was listening to a presentation last week where somebody said, when I go alone, I go fast. When I go with others, we go far. And I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at teamwork. So certainly understand the value of teaching it, and the fact that you're teaching it is amazing. What are some of the strategies you use to impart those lessons to your students?
Well, in sports psych, we actually play a game, and then they come up with ideas of what makes a good team. Like, I put them in groups of 4 and give them what does big team, little mean? What does that even mean? How do you use it in your job? How do you use it in this classroom? How do you use it at your work? And so they give examples of how they can play their role at their job, or they can, play their role in their family. Like, everybody, has these parts of their lives that we're a team of. And I'm a team in my softball team, but I'm a team when I'm the teacher in my classroom. Like, we're all a team together. And if there's a bunch of people not on board, then we got to figure out how to motivate them and get them on board and have them bring their best talents and gifts, or they're not going to contribute, and we need their ideas because everybody's ideas are valuable.
Absolutely. So teaching those students that maybe aren't completely on board to refocus, to look at their learning in a different way. I know that refocusing is something that you teach in the classroom, along with goal setting. And, what you say is playing to win, not playing not to lose, which we've all, many of us, I certainly have heard that in a sports setting. You want to play to win, you don't want to play not to lose.
Right.
How do you take those types of lessons and then make them apply to kind of the greater process of going through life here on the planet Earth?
Right. Play to win. It's an awesome concept, but it's mostly about like having a game plan and being aggressive and taking risks. I'm not saying like dangerous risks, like squirrel suit, jumping off, stuff like that. I'm just taking maybe risks in business, maybe risks at your job, maybe, for sure risks in sport where I'm going to steal the base. I'm going to take that risk. I might get out. I might fail. I feel like when we take risks, we fail a lot, but you might never get ahead if you don't take that risk and you don't take that leap of faith to the next level of trying or being assertive and meeting new people or getting out of your comfort zone. I feel like, playing to win is getting out of your comfort zone and really trying new things that could be advantageous to you.
Yeah, I think about, I'm a football fan, I'm a sports fan in general, but, I think about football, and we used to joke about the prevent defense, right? I mean, putting your deep backs in your corners and your, your safeties way back off of the receivers to kind of prevent the big play.
Holding them off.
Yeah, the prevent defense was one way of preventing your team from winning, right? I mean, you're playing not to lose,
not
right?
To lose. Yeah,
you're running the ball the whole fourth quarter because you've got a 10-point lead and you're trying to protect that lead, and then the other team comes back and scores 2 touchdowns and takes that victory away from you. So that's playing not to lose, and playing to win is, look, yeah, I'm going to be sensible. I'm not going to take crazy risk, but let's play this game to win. Let's be aggressive. Let's keep pushing and taking that lesson then into the student's life. So tell us a little bit then about, and we were talking about this on the lift, right? You were like, oh, it's just so rewarding. I have students that come back once they're, whatever they're doing after high school, going into, post-secondary education, going into the workforce and coming back and saying, oh my goodness, I learned this lesson and it applied so far outside of what we did in the classroom. Do you have any great stories about that'll resonate with the audience?
Yeah, I was thinking about some. I have some kids that like go and get jobs later. Everybody needs to go figure out how to employ themselves, right? And we practice job interview questions, and a big part of sports psychology is preparing well. Like, it's one of your controllables. Like, I can prepare for things. I can prepare for the math test. I can practice those things. And he came back a couple days later and he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we practiced that in class, because I was so familiar with the questions and I had so much confidence because I prepared well and I practiced it out and I thought through it in my mind. And anyway, that was cool. And I just had yesterday, I had a biker. He's in Puerto Rico racing mountain bikes, and he sent me a text and he's like, I'm racing tomorrow. Give me some tips. What do you think? And so I just told him, make sure you practice the technical parts. I'm a mountain biker, and so there's technical parts where, if you practice them, like imagery, even in your mind, just practice so many times in your mind that it feels comfortable to you. And that's the parts where other people will slip up. There's this cool part. It's a Japanese word called kaizen. It's about practicing our weaknesses. And I feel like, we don't want to practice our weaknesses because we don't understand them. It's hard for us. It's embarrassing to practice our weaknesses. But I have this mom that's so awesome, and she's a fantastic teacher. And I was playing the piano growing up as a kid, and she would be in the kitchen listening, and she's like, that one part that's not very good, practice that part 20 times. And so there I am. But that's the hard part, so I didn't really want to practice it. But I did, and I'd practice that hard part really a whole bunch. And then she's like, when you practice the hard part, then the whole thing sounds good. And I feel like as a math teacher, like when I give out the study guide, if I say, okay, don't do any of the stuff only do the hard parts. And do the hard parts and practice them. And if you can't do the hard parts, I'm here to help you. I'm your helper, right? And I'm your cheerleader. But learn how to do the things you don't know, because when you understand those, the whole test will go well for you because you already know the other stuff. But human nature, we all practice the things we're good at because it feels good and it makes us happy. Like, oh, good, I'm good at this. I'm good at something, right? So it feels good to be good at something. And the hard things, we don't know how to really deal with them. And so I feel like when we can figure out how to deal with those hard things and have other methods like the Sudoku, I'm going to try this other method that might help me with the hard thing, or I'm going to get a teacher that can help me and be patient, or I'm going to do Khan Academy, or we got Google. Like, I didn't have Google when I was taking math in college.
For sure. Yeah, there was no YouTube to watch somebody do the equation,
I have
right?
a YouTube channel of math videos. Like, there's no excuse for these kids to not learn. I'm like, come on, guys, you got it.
Absolutely. We'll make sure and link up that channel in the show notes for the audience if they want to check that out. I didn't know you were a mountain biker. I love that. Amazing how many people get into skiing and mountain biking. Probably a lot of the same, the same personality traits and kind of thrill seeking.
Right.
But I love mountain biking. In fact, my favorite place to mountain bike is probably 3 hours or so southeast of you in Moab, Utah. So love that whole area. And some interesting examples that are resonating with me as you're going through that. The first one is, and we have great mountain biking, believe it or not, in the Midwest, and about an hour from where I live, the Emma Carlin Trail is some of the best mountain biking anywhere in the Midwest. And used to ride that a lot. Yeah, it's awesome. But used to ride that. It's different style of mountain biking, right? You're not on a trail like you would be in the West. You're on a, it's a lot of dirt, it's sand, it's, what have you.
Absolutely.
Not a lot of slick rock, but awesome mountain biking. And you'll see the riders that are really good. Like if you're doing a technical climb on a mountain bike and all of a sudden, you lose your balance a little bit, put a foot down, stop, you don't have any momentum. Right. Probably 9 out of 10 bikers just push their bike up to the top of whatever they keep going. And it's that 1 out of 10 that turns around and goes back to the bottom and says, I'm going to try that again. Those are the really, really good riders. They're taking the hard part. They're doing the part that they're struggling with, and they're practicing that over and over and over again, just like the example from the piano piece that you can't play. So love that example. The other one, and I actually write a magazine column every month, and I've been toying with an idea. When I'm teaching people how to ride a mountain bike, everybody wants to look at, like what's right in front of my wheel, right? What's right in front of my wheel. And if you do that, guaranteed you're running into something or you're running off the trail. Or they pick the thing they want to avoid and they stare at it and then they run right into it. And so the whole logic, the whole psychology in mountain biking is looking down the trail, looking at what's ahead of you in, 10, 20 feet. And your body and your muscle memory will take care of the rest, right? It'll steer you through that stuff. You don't have to look right at it. There's a huge life lesson that's kind of buried in there somewhere as well.
Right. Like for goal setting or look ahead, there's this part in Draper where it's practicing and they have all these signs and one of them is look ahead, pick a path. And I feel like every time I
Yeah,
pick my eyes up and go, oh yeah, I got this. My body knows how to do this. And it's
totally.
so great. And I feel like it's goal setting. And my favorite quote about goal setting is from Rudy at the movie Rudy. I don't know if you know that. I show it in
Yep,
my
for
sports
sure.
podcast.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
he says, dreams are what make life tolerable. And I just feel like we have to have goals. And, I teach writing them down and put them in your mirror where you brush your teeth, because everybody brushes their teeth, right? And, and write those
Right.
goals down and look at them and look ahead in your life and, go be awesome. Like, I have this sign that says, go be great. And I just really want kids to believe they can do things and not, if I get to the hard things, that there's lots of ways around the hard things and there's people on the earth to help you, and they're putting
For
your
sure.
path for sure too.
Some of my favorite reading is Malcolm Gladwell, who talks about the people that face the most hurdles while they're going through, while they're going through their younger life, sometimes end up being the best leaders when they get to their adult life, because they get so good at going around over through the challenges that are put in front of them,
Right.
that when they, if you have those challenges during your pathway, whatever that is through education, then when you get to adulthood, you're way more adept at navigating some of those hurdles, and so much of what you're doing is kind of right along those lines. So one of those hurdles is this whole idea of math anxiety, which I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know was a thing. What is math anxiety, and how do you teach your students to get past it and to handle it?
Right. I think it's just the social, even our whole society is like, oh, math's too hard. It's way above my pay grade. I can't do that. I think we talk ourselves out of it the first time it gets hard. And we don't remember that, oh yeah, there's another way. There's another method. Like, maybe they haven't had a positive environment to learn in. Like, one of my jobs is to be really patient with math anxiety and kind and caring. Like, they know that I want them to learn and I want them to get through this obstacle. And I feel like that's why you have teachers, right? I know people can all do online school and other kinds of options, but that's why they have me, right?
Sure.
That's because I'm going to love them through it and care about them in this moment. Like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I feel like with math anxiety, you can change that self-talk to, I got this. I'm awesome. I have this big sign at the front of my class that says, you got this. And some days, I get to work every morning at 7, and I coach the softball team, and I'm not home till like 9 o'clock at night sometimes. And
Right.
that sign's
Yeah.
up there for me. I got this. Like, I can go be positive
Right.
with these kids, and I can go love them and help them learn today and be patient with them. But I feel like if every time it gets hard, we go, oh, you got this. Okay, I just have to try a new method. Back to Sudoku, coming back around to that. Don't quit. I mean, that's just my message to 15-year-olds and everybody else is like, when it gets tough, like, that's when we should dig in more and find a new method and find a better, maybe it's other people to surround ourselves with for a minute. Maybe, like, there's lots of avenues that you maybe have to change if you're going to move through that hard thing.
Right. Well, and I think there's a really good message about the value of teachers, especially in this age of technology, that was embedded in that last answer that you offered, Kathy. And yeah, there's a lot of anxiety. Speaking of anxiety in education right now, about the advent of technology, the ability to use data to predict a student's outcomes, to rearrange course sequences or their path through education to guarantee, or at least to give us the best chance at an outcome. One that's kind of been bouncing around in my head is, with all the things that AI and machine learning can do, what can AI and machine learning not do? And I think you just touched on one of the really important parts of that. There's some study I read about a year ago that said that a 6-month-old cat has more emotional intelligence than ChatGPT does. A 6-month-old cat can read your emotions and respond to your emotions better than generative artificial intelligence. And so, you think about the value of a teacher, the ability to not just usher a student through their education pathway, but to, as we say oftentimes, to pull them when they need to be pulled, to push them when they need to be pushed, to hug them when they need a hug, figuratively at least, and then to have the wisdom to know which to do when, which really is kind of an example, I think, of the incredible value that teachers are going to have. That in as much as we can use technology and we can use YouTube and we can use Google to sharpen our skills and to learn things we didn't know, in the end, the good teachers that both embrace technology and continue with that incredible empathy for their students and the ability to relate to a student and push, pull, hug when they need to be push, pulled, and hugged, really, really important. Do you see it the same way as we kind of looked at the future of education?
Absolutely. I mean, the math anxiety, I don't think that goes away with AI. I think it goes
Right.
away with somebody giving you some confidence and changing your path a little bit and saying, maybe you should look at it a little bit different. Maybe you don't really have math anxiety. Maybe this one part's just hard for you. The whole thing's not hard for you. Look at, and I feel like the perfectionists, like they struggle because, you got 8 out of 10 and they're like, I got 2 wrong. I'm like, well, you got 8 right. It's like
Right. Exactly.
being an optimist and a pessimist. Like maybe you see it. This is how as your teacher, I want you to see it. Like, look at all the stuff you did well. Okay, you just did a little bit of math wrong. You shouldn't think you're a dummy at math. And the kids keep putting things like, I'm so stupid. I'm like, nope, you're smart. You're really brave. And we fail sometimes when we're doing hard things. And failing is part of learning. Like you learn all the lessons when you're failing, right? That's the story of competence.
Yeah, I learned a lot in high school because I failed all the time, right? I mean, 8 out of 10 right for me would have been like a record strong performance. So that wouldn't have given me anxiety. That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I survived my high school journey, and we talk about that quite a bit on the podcast.
Right.
But probably could have used a lot more Kathy Meyers type teachers, and I had some great ones. Not to make light of my educational journey, but I love the way that you're approaching some of these things. I got to believe, Kathy, you've got advice for other teachers who are thinking about this as well. So we've got this whole idea of sports psychology, of positive self-talk, of reinforcing those messages inside of our brains, of manifesting that into performance inside and outside the classroom. If I'm a teacher and I'm interested in taking some of the lessons that you've learned through your sports psychology journey and your both formal education and application in the classroom, what advice would you have for those teachers who are trying to figure this out?
I feel like as a teacher, we can change the world. And I know I've changed a lot of students over my 31 years of teaching. And because I see them in my neighborhood and they're like, oh my gosh, you're my favorite teacher. And I was just opening the book, the Sean Aker book he does all the research. Sean Aker, he does a lot of research on positive psychology. And I just was opening my book and I had a thank you letter in it. It said, you actually made math fun for me. You made me love it. And really, that's where we're better than AI, where we can bring the fun and the motivation. And I reached out to all the parents because I knew this parent-teacher conference was coming up. I'm like, hey, just wondered how you use math in your everyday life, whether you're a stay-at-home parent or you're a CEO of a major company. Will you do a short video so I can show it to my class? And parents like, this is so cool. I'd love to tell my kids why I do math. And had hairdressers say, oh, I mix chemicals all day long. And, people that you don't even think use math, that really use math all the time. Right. And so
Absolutely.
I feel like I'm the as a teacher, you're the motivator. You're whatever energy you bring every day, kids feed off it. And so if I bring positive, like exciting energy, then kids like feel it, right? They feed
Absolutely.
off that. And if I bring like mopey, boo, humbug me, it's the same. They feed off it.
Yeah, it's contagious
and
too,
they would
right?
say, what's wrong, Myers? You okay today? Because kids are awesome. They feel you. They see you. I'm halfway through my year. They get to know you. And I feel that. I feel that in my own life. Every day I want to try to bring my best self to them. Like that's my goal as a teacher. And someday your best self is rough. Like you're like, okay, I got to cheer myself on. I got to be my own cheerleader and my own self-talk to like pump myself up.
Sure.
Right. And I shouldn't expect other people to do that. Right. But I got to pump myself up and now I got to go take my job seriously. Right.
Right. Absolutely. I once had a person, this is several companies ago, we were kind of talking about like your mood when you come to work and so on. And so to your point, some people are mopey, some people are really down. And I always try to be super upbeat. And if somebody asks me how I'm doing, I'm telling them I'm awesome or I'm amazing or things are going great or whatever. Right. Somebody at work one time said, it's really annoying when you do that. Like the rest of us are kind of just getting going and you're like all bubbly and happy at work. And she's like, it's actually kind of annoying. And I'm like, well, sorry that's annoying, but I'm not changing it because that's just it's a great way to reinforce with yourself, even on those days. And I don't have many of them, but even on those days when maybe you don't quite feel like you're your best self, just telling yourself you are and putting yourself in the mode. And sure enough, an hour later, it's like you forgot about what was ever weighing on you and you're off and into your day. So I think that's great advice for educators is, be your best self, stay positive, right. Set the tone for your classroom. And then get those really heartwarming notes from, so teaching for 31 years, students that were sophomores in high school when you started are now well into their, I guess into their mid 40s, right? I mean, so do you still hear from those students?
Yes, sometimes. Like I was actually in our city, I live in Draper, there was a parade and there was a girl riding a horse, and she saw me in the parade. I was just like on the sidelines with my children, and she's like, Myers, oh my goodness, you're my favorite teacher ever. I need to come talk to you after the parade. So stay right there. And I just feel like it's such a like payback moment where like, oh, I made a difference in someone's life. And that's really why I got into teaching a long time ago, because I wanted to help people, especially with math. I was always pretty good at math, but I wasn't some brainiac. And so I worked hard at it. Everybody can do math. Like, that's my message. And STEM stuff, like math is like that basis of a lot of STEM. Everyone can do it. And we as teachers should not be putting kids in boxes and saying, nope, don't be doing anything math related, because, you know, we need to be their best cheerleader and their best, like, you can do this. Just get the people around you, work your hardest. You're going to maybe have to work way harder than the kid sitting next to you, but that's okay. Hard work is valuable. Yeah. Hard work is where we learn lots of the lessons of life.
I actually had a teacher after my freshman year of high school tell me that I wasn't good at math and I should choose a career that didn't require it. But I did get myself on the right track. I ended up, early in my career, before doing the stuff I'm doing now, I got my CPA and I was working in public accounting. And that was the student, by the way, that after his freshman year of high school, the teacher said, you should do something that doesn't involve numbers. I'm like, well, that didn't work out so well for him, but it worked out pretty well for me.
Right.
Speaking of things working out pretty well, obviously your education pathway has put you on a great trajectory. To your earlier point, having these students 31 years later coming and saying, you were my favorite teacher, you had an impact on my life, and think about how many times that pays dividends over and over and over again as that person lives out their life. That's why people like you get into teaching, or at least it should be, is to change the lives of students. And I think that's probably the motivation for most people that find their way into education and choose that as a career. As you kind of reflect back on your education journey, Kathy, both in terms of being a student and now for 31 years in the classroom, what's something that you believe about education that very few people would necessarily see the same way?
Keep believing in the underdog. Really get to know kids and try to figure out what makes them tick so that you can be that person to help them through that hard path right now, right?
So not just focusing on your high flyers and on those students that have it all figured out and are doing amazing, but maybe that one that is lagging a little bit behind.
And the high flyers, like, keep flying high. Like, let's keep motivating you. Like, I'll keep giving you harder things to do because I want you to succeed too. That's the hard thing with so many kids in our classroom, is try to help all of them, right? Just make sure you're helping the underdog. Like, I believe in that for sure. And positive mindset. Sometimes with the mindset, you have to fake it till you make it. Like, sometimes you're really having a bad day and I still got to show up to work and I'm going to just keep cheerleading myself. And that's a real thing, that when you keep talking positive to yourself and bringing optimism and hope, that your brain creates neural pathways, this is psychology of it, of much more positivity and much more happiness in your life and success. And like, that's all the positive psychology, cool stuff, that I believe in that so much. And maybe other people believe in that, but I for sure believe in that.
I'm not sure everybody does. I'm a huge believer in it. I mean, a lot of the things that I'm hearing from you, at least in my life, have their roots in stuff I've read from people like, Anthony Robbins, certainly huge into, positive self-thinking, Napoleon Hill, Norman Vincent Peale. I mean, all the writers that in some cases are decades and decades old, but that's the message, right? I mean, fake it till you make it. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right is one of my favorite ones. It's just all about believing in yourself and being able to create that future. And over the course of time, it becomes a habit. You start to wire your brain in that particular way, and it repeats itself over and over and over again. So really, really good way of looking at the education journey, the value of a teacher, finding that underdog, taking that person under your wing, showing them how they can be something. And those are really the teachers that make the biggest difference in my opinion. It's not necessarily the one that had the perfect curriculum or the best way of teaching, fill in the blank or whatever. It's the one that really took a personal interest in a student, showed them they had a skill or an ability they didn't know they had, put their life on a career or personal pathway that they never would have been on without that individual. It really is the magic and the huge value of teaching. We've got just time for one last question here with Kathy Meyers. And that question for you, Kathy, is to go back in time. So let's turn the clock back to that 15-year-old Kathy. And if you could give that person any advice, what would that advice be?
Believe in your dreams, have dreams, and then do everything you can to accomplish them and fight for it and keep learning every day of your life. I teach kids to set goals in sports psychology, and we set goals just for like the quarter, which is 10 weeks. And I'm 54, and I'm like, I need to set a new goal. We should never quit setting goals. We should never quit growing and learning. That's what I'd say to myself. Just, keep believing and try to stay optimistic when the whole world can be pessimistic, and maybe people around you can be pessimistic. You can still change the whole tone because of your energy and your love and your goodness you give, or your motivation you give to other people.
I absolutely could not agree more. So be a lifelong goal setter, be a lifelong learner, whether you're 15 years old or 54. Keep putting those goals out in front of you. I'm glad we set a goal of having Kathy on the podcast after we met that day on the chairlift in Sun Valley, Idaho. Just a really, really inspiring message about how we can change the world of education through positive thinking, positive reinforcement, sports psychology, thinking about our problems the right way, getting over the whole idea of math anxiety. Anybody can be good at math. They just have to have the right mindset and the right teacher in a lot of cases. In your case, Kathy, doing great things in the classroom. So thank you so much for being with us. We really had a good time having this conversation. Enjoyed having you on the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
And we appreciate our audience being with us as well here on the Tech Ed Podcast. Kathy mentioned the YouTube channel that she's got for some of her content. She also mentioned some books, as did I. We'll link all that up in the show notes for this week's episode. You will find those show notes at techedpodcast.com/Meyers. That's techedpodcast.com/MEYERS. When you're done there on the show notes, be sure to check us out on social media. We are all over social. We would love to hear from you. And until next week on the Tech Ed Podcast, my name is Matt Kirchner. Thank you for being with us.